Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or whatever it might be for you right now. Welcome to the Rethinking Youth Ministry podcast, where every single week we hope to raise the bar for youth ministry, ask some questions, interview thinkers, have some real honest conversations about what it looks like to lead the next generation. I'm Brett, and this week I have the honor to be joined by Ashley.
Hey.
And Tyler.
What's up?
And Trey.
Yo.
So Tyler and Trey, this is your guys' first time on the episode.
Yeah. We're not brothers, even though our names sound the same.
That's right.
So
Yeah, they do sound
Tyler
like
and-
twins.
We look alike, though.
we'd be a great pop duo.
We would. Tyler and Trey. I like it. Or Trey and Tyler, maybe.
Ooh,
Trey and Tyler sounds better.
yeah. Trey's more handsome, Tyler. You got to lead with that. You got to lead with that.
I guess I'll
So
play keyboard.
Tyler's reputation, whatever that word is, precedes himself a little bit. He's been talked about on the podcast before. He's on staff with us on the XP3 team, which is the curriculum that we're a part of here at Orange.
Yeah, so I'm a managing editor here for the XP3 curriculum at Orange. So my job is to keep it on time and get it out the door. I'm on the middle school team, so I've been a part of middle school ministries for the past 6 years, and I'm on this podcast today because I've been a worship leader for the past 10 years as well.
Very cool.
Nice.
What's your instrument of choice?
Keyboard,
The keyboard.
Yeah.
Have you ever played a keytar
once.
on stage during
and
worship?
it wasn't cool.
Please tell me there are pictures.
No.
What about you, Trey?
Yes.
Who are you?
Who I am.
Where
Yes.
do you come- who
My
are
name.
you?
I don't
And
know.
how dare you?
I'm still trying to figure that out. Yeah. My name's Trey, and I am joining you guys for the first time today. Thank you for having me. You finally answered my text messages and phone calls and showing up at your house late at night. So I have a wife and two beautiful little boys, a 5-year-old and a 5-month-old, so we're in the thick of it right now. But they're incredible. So I am a student pastor at Woodstock City Church, about 20 miles northwest of where we are right now, of Atlanta.
Very cool.
And then I've also been a worship leader for about 15 years. So
Very cool.
Yeah.
So this week we are going to be talking about this idea of setting up worship in your student ministry to win. And that's why we have these two veteran worship leaders in student ministries, and also Ashley, who looks for
that was a very hearty throat
every
clear there.
opportunity she can
Yeah.
to sing something.
My only musical talent is listening to music.
Okay.
And it really is a talent because, like, sometimes I find worship leaders, they're very musical, but I don't hear each individual sound. I just hear it all as one sound. And that's important.
Sure.
It is. Most people do.
So you know when the band sounds bad, basically.
Pretty much. And I'm the lead vocalist for the Think Orange podcast.
All right. So with worship, we've all been in the conversations. We've all led the conversations where we try to help students understand that worship is more than just music. Yeah? Worship's a lifestyle. Worship is the way that we talk to this person. Worship is the way that we treat people. But we're specifically going to be talking today about what does it look like for us to set up our worship time together in youth ministry, our large group time where we're lifting our voices as one to sing to the Lord as a win for students. Yeah? We all on the same page?
Love it.
Oh, yeah.
So let's jump into some different questions. So what do you think is different about worshiping with students where it's focused when we're looking at whether we're talking about 6th through 12th grade or we're talking about middle school or we're talking about high school, how is it different than worship with adults, kind of what I would call big church worship because I'm a PK who grew up in church? What's different?
Yeah. As I've thought through this over the past however many years, for me, I've had the opportunity to lead in adult ministries as well as student ministries, including middle school, high school. Most of my time is spent in high school now. But one thing that I've noticed as I've talked with students and as I've just experienced this whole thing is that students are very experiential. And not to say that adults aren't, but I think that students are way more apt to want to go all in from the start. I mean, if you think about everything that students do, they want to be a part of something with their friends. They have that whole FOMO thing, fear of missing out.
Yeah.
And so they want to experience something together with their friends. Whereas I think a lot of times the adults are more so just, hey, let's just get through this.
What do you think, Tyler? What's different?
I think that's the perfect first question to ask because the truth is it's so different leading for students, where I don't think a lot of worship leaders consider the fact that high schoolers are unique, middle schoolers are unique, and even the adults they lead are very, very unique in what they respond to and how they process information. So working with middle schoolers need a completely different language than you might approach adults with. And that's one of the things that as worship leaders, we're not as cued to know and understand, because we might have just been called from the big stage and they say, hey, we need a worship leader for middle schooler. So it's one of those things that you need to keep in the front of your mind. But as far as why it's different, I would say language is the most important in what sort of language you use and how you communicate to them.
So what do you mean by language? What does that look like?
I would say for middle school, your language needs to be concrete.
Okay.
Middle schoolers aren't going to understand sort of vague concepts. Their language isn't as wide in terms of what they're going to understand. So make it really plain, really simple, and use a lot of examples. They're not as able to piece things together. So like high schoolers might be able to like relate to a concept without you telling them. Middle schoolers, you kind of have to connect the dots of why what we're singing corresponds to something in their life. So you kind of have to link that for them in language that they can understand.
And it's really hard because worship songs are written in a spiritual sense. So spirituality is abstract as it is.
It's very difficult
and
to understand.
so many
sometimes.
worship songs are like so much imagery. And, you know, a middle school student will take everything concrete, everything that you say. So like a tidal wave, like they're picturing an ocean for real, like not what that has to do with, you know, God's presence.
Right. And so what can we do then as worship leaders? What can we do to help them understand some of that? Whether we're talking about high schoolers, whether we're talking about middle schoolers, if there is some of that language. I see what you're saying, like with middle schoolers, let's try to find some songs with lyrics that are a little bit easier for them to understand, more concrete. But if we're using some of that language, how can we set them up to understand this from the stage as worship leaders?
One of the things that, you know, Tyler and I were able to serve not only here at Orange together, but we also served at a church up in Maryland together.
That's
and
Maryland for all you normal people.
But it sounds more like Disneyland
I was
when you say
actually
it that
wondering.
way.
It's nothing like Disney World.
But something...
It's great.
But something we always talked about was the importance of teaching students what lyrics meant before you moved into the song. Like, even if it's just the chorus, like, hey, in this song, these are the lyrics of this song, and this is what that actually means. And I think that sets the students up to connect with at least the chorus, right? Especially if it's the first time they heard the song.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because you're kind of talking about teaching, and it goes beyond just teaching, but you're building culture in those early years. They probably don't understand what a worship culture is. So by teaching them what the songs are, the language we're using, why we're using it, you're actually building culture as you play these songs, which is super important in those early years.
Yeah. One thing that's worked really well for us, that I think that I don't even know that I, as the quote unquote leader, realized initially, but the further we got into it, we realized we needed to take advantage of the opportunities to tie lyrics in songs to particular vulnerable moments, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So for us, you know, we would, in our environment, we're able to do baptisms within our environment. And we don't do them all the time, but every few weeks we'll do that. And we'll show a video that shares a student's story just before they're baptized. And so what we try to coach our worship leaders on a lot of the time is, hey, as you're watching through this video in preparation throughout the week, I want you to be thinking through how you're going to set up the next song that we're going to do following this baptism. And so we've got one girl who just is incredible, and she was able to take a particular song. I'm trying to remember which song it was and which lyrics it was, but basically based off of something that the student said in their video, she then took something from that and said, hey, you know, it's interesting that this student said this just before she was baptized, and you have on display for you this life change that's happened, this thing that's happened in her life where now she's able to profess before everyone, all of her friends, all of her family, hey, this is the change that's happened in me, and it's because of this. And it just so happens that the lyrics were very similar to what she had communicated in her video. So now students are taking this and they're saying, oh, these are words that I've sung for years, maybe, some of them.
Yeah.
But now maybe for some students, that's the first time that they're able to make the connection. Oh, when I say, I didn't earn it, I don't deserve it, that's what that means, because I just saw it in front of my eyes.
Yeah.
You know, which has been really, really powerful. So we've started to look for more times, more opportunities to be able to highlight those kinds of things.
It's awesome.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So let's take one step back. So we have a vast audience that hangs out with us each week and listens, ranging from church leaders who have ministries where they've got huge bands that are coming in, they've got lights, and that's just kind of a normal part. They've got worship scheduled in. It's a huge part of what they do on a weekly basis. And we've got churches that's just, whether that's because of space or whether that's because of not having the right people with the right gifts or not having equipment, whatever it is, that a time of worship just isn't built into their kind of youth ministry, their student ministry time together. So what would be one of the things that you guys would say that, hey, this is one of the things that when we allow worship to be a part of our student ministry experience, these are some of the benefits of that. This is some of the ways, even if you can't do it every week, these are some of the ways that we would say, hey, if you think about trying to do it once a month, this would be some of the benefits of that.
Yeah. Gosh, one thing that we've said a lot is, and this is a very simple phrase, but it's the songs we sing affect the lives we live. And I think that when we sit through that lens of we're singing a song, there are words that are on a page or that are attached to this melodic thing. If you think about music as a whole, music is very emotional. It's very flowy. Flowy is not the word, but it's dynamic, you know? And so when you think about music and you think about a worship experience from the standpoint of music, I think that the benefit that you're going to get from that is that the facts and the truth that we present, those are great. And that's something that you have to have, obviously. I mean, everything that we do is based on the truth. But when you can tie that to something that can be a very emotional experience, whether it's a worship song or not, songs are emotional either way. But when you can tie something that's an emotional experience to that, it creates a moment that I think is something that allows them to kind of move from this idea of, maybe I'm a consumer to now I'm a participant in what you're doing.
Absolutely.
And so there's research that even says that like parts of the brain involving memory are activated when listening to music.
Wow.
So as a way to like remember God's truth, like there's no better way than, when a song gets stuck in your head, like that's the greatest way to remember God's truth. If you can remember that lyric or that phrase, that's powerful in your daily life because then it's not just something that happens on Sunday. It's something that you carry with you throughout the week, where it's just this piece that you can kind of hold on to. And it's the reason that I can remember all the words to a Reliant K song in 8th grade. It just sticks with you, you know?
I love it. And I think music is such a huge part of student culture, youth culture right now. And I think that they gravitate towards it regardless if they have musical abilities or not. And I think that, the more that they can see that God can infiltrate any part of culture, I think maybe they would be more open to hearing the truth of Jesus. And I was also thinking I remember when I was a teenager, I had always heard about God, but I didn't know there was a difference between knowing about God and knowing God, And I remember I went through this summer camp, and it was actually during worship, and it wasn't about necessarily the words that I was singing. It was about watching other people worship. Like that was so impactful to me as a teenager because I had never seen people my age in love with Jesus before. Like I just had never seen it. And it was really powerful to me. I'm like, well, what am I missing? Like, I don't feel that. I don't even know what that is, And it was very influential on me. And I think especially in middle school when they're so awkward as it is. And, anyone that's listening at least middle school knows like the students stand like 4 feet apart from each other throughout the room. Like they're stiff and awkward and also stand far apart from each other. And students watching their leaders connecting with God through music, I think can be very impactful for a student to kind of explore that experience for themselves.
Well, was it Donald Miller that said that sometimes you can't love something until you've seen somebody else love that? And so that absolutely happens in worship, where that was one of the things that we always beat the drum with our adults. Hey, don't stand in the back during worship. We want you sitting or standing, with your students because we want you to model what it looks like to do this so that they'll then have an understanding of what that looks like. One of the ways we used to talk about this is the idea of faith language is that, for the last church that I was at, we always encourage students to attend, again, what I call big church because I'm a church kid. We wanted them to attend big church. We wanted them to learn to worship, to be a part of their extended family. But the songs that were being sung weren't necessarily their faith language. And so for us, one of the values of doing worship together as a student ministry was, hey, we wanted to do some songs that we feel like that they're going to connect with on a different level emotionally, that they're going to have a better understanding of, like what you were saying, Tyler, of some of the language, that it fits better for the phase they're in, that they're going to be able to, to be led by some of that maybe a little bit better because it's more intentionally for them than some of these other settings, which can still be helpful settings for them in a sense of worship, but isn't necessarily as easy for them to connect with.
Yeah. I have a thought. I'm not sure how connected it is, so we'll see. But no, it's cool when you mention, and maybe you can clarify for me. You were talking about when you see the adults engaged. Were you talking about the student ministry versus an adult ministry where it's not necessarily geared toward the students in particular?
Yeah, I was talking leaders in the student environment.
Yep.
Setting that example, showing them this is what it can look like.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something we lean into all the time. Our small group leaders are our rock stars.
Yeah.
I know we a few weeks ago talked about this whole rock star mentality of, that the student leader, the student pastor is not the rock star. I 100% would say our small group leaders are the rock stars. They're the ones who are in the trenches. They're the ones who are having the conversations, who are experiencing the late night text messages. And so because they have that kind of connection with the students, when the student sees that adult, just like you said, when they see that adult going for it, and it doesn't always look like, both hands raised, fully extended, with the braces and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily look like that, but it's just, there's an authenticity. And I know from a high school standpoint, we talked about language earlier. High schoolers want authentic.
Yeah.
They want something that's real. And I think when they see an adult who's presenting something that is real in their expression and in their worship, they automatically want to follow suit.
Yep. Absolutely.
I think it's also important because there are students in every student ministry who are gifted musically. And I think that if you never see it, it's hard to imagine you'll ever be it, if that makes sense. If it's never part of your youth ministry, why would they even dream of being able to use their musical passions in the church? Of course, they're going to go somewhere else to use them, right? So I think that's why it's important.
So Ash, are you saying that you think that students should be invited to always be a part of the student worship kind of that's happening in youth ministries?
Well, this is just my humble opinion, but yes, 100%. I am in full favor of students being on the stage with adults if they have to be, or if it's all students, that's awesome. I know that sometimes you lose quality of music, but I think when a teenager stands on a stage in front of their peers, the students are more likely to pay attention to them anyways and engage with them. And also for those students who feel like called to lead in worship ministry, I think that there is no better training ground than doing it with your friends, with people who are a little further along in their walk with Christ, like adult worship leaders. And I think that when they get to experience it, that's when they'll fall in love with it. It's not necessarily just listening to it.
Yeah, I would agree with that almost 100%. I think absolutely, I'm in full support of students being a part of that. I think that you have to have the right student. Obviously, obviously you're not going to let, just any guy, who's like, hey, I can play the guitar and I can sing too. Can I play next week? Yeah, sure, Johnny, get it. So I think that there's a level of almost vetting that I think, and it's not just a matter of tryouts. It's not just a matter of, do you have the musical talent? I think that you do have some students who are very much seeking the stage. And when you have that, we as leaders have to be really good about sniffing that out and then helping guide them in the right direction so that the reasons that they're wanting to be on the stage are the right reasons. But I think as long as you're able to figure that out, as long as you're able to do that with the right student, then 100% they're going to be a type of person that can lead by example so that other students can see that, and you never know what you might awaken in another student. So
Yeah, and in your ministry with your worship leaders too, that should be an exciting opportunity too, to be able to come alongside those students and engage them in a way that they're passionate about. Mm-hmm. If music is their skill, they're going to want to run with it. And what a cool way to like run alongside them in teaching them not just how to play music, but sort of how to live alongside of that. Like that was something I got when I was just starting out, where people came alongside of me and taught me not just how to be a better vocalist, but how to live a life that I could be confident in how I live, not just on the stage, but off the stage. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in that too.
Yeah.
And for some youth ministries, that's probably the best chance you have to have some sort of worship in your ministry. Is that you find some people that can be invested in, that you can give an opportunity to lead, and then watch them hopefully grow and blossom and see more people get interest. They're like, oh, well, if he can do that, I can get involved in that. Or if she can sing, then, can I sing too? And there's just almost that permission that begins to happen, like where they have permission to lead, to use their gifts, to step up and have opportunities.
Yeah. The part of me that I think that I look at is, I think maybe somebody listening to this might be thinking, well, gosh, what if I'm not a musician at all? I'm a youth leader, but I'm not a musician, but I've got this guy who's coming to me, or this girl who's coming to me saying, hey, I think I can do this. But as the leader, do we feel like we have the ability to lead them? And I think that's where it's not a matter of their talent either. As we're coming alongside, worship leaders, me as a leader who's been a worship leader, Tyler, as you have been a worship leader. And I think that as we come alongside them, our gift does not have to be that as well. It doesn't have to be that we're musical. I think it is a matter of a lot of the off-stage stuff as well, too, to coach them along, that it is a worship lifestyle, I guess,
So if you listen a few months back to an episode that Marco did with us, when he talked about the teenage brain, he talked about this idea that the anterior cingulate in our brains allows us to understand a God who is compassionate and personal when that part of our brain is developed. And if we have a faith ruled by our amygdala, it's a fear-based faith. If it's ruled by a prefrontal cortex, it's a logical, rational faith. But to have a thriving, vibrant faith who knows a God who loves us and wants to be in a relationship with us, then that means we have a highly developed anterior cingulate. And so if you haven't listened to that episode, you need to. That's a lot of language. He explains it way better than that. But one of the most fascinating aspects to what he was talking about there is that one of the top ways to help develop that part of the brain that helps us understand God as loving and compassionate is by corporately singing faith songs together. And so with that idea, not just kind of, oh yeah, but my gut just tells me worship is important, there's scientific evidence that when we worship together, that affects how our brain understands God. So what do you think that should mean for us in youth ministry world?
I think we should really push to create some great worship experiences.
Yeah, and I think what's notable about that is, so the worship experience in itself, like there's the music side of it, but there's also the fact that we're spending 15 minutes giving dedicated attention to something. And I think that's what's so powerful about it, is that we're choosing to take that time and to look at God and his nature and his qualities and really nothing else. And I think that's so contrary to what we do on a daily basis, where what we see on a daily basis might be anxiety, loss, disappointment. Mm-hmm. So those moments where we can take that time and we can choose to look at God and his qualities is a powerful, powerful experience, because it's choosing to look at God and his nature rather than the things we're used to and consumed with every day. So we can literally, by shifting our attention, we can also turn our hearts as well. And over time, I think that changes us.
I think also, looking into that research further, it talks about it being a daily practice. And I think for youth workers listening, as important as that 15 minutes of worship is in your programming, maybe what's more important is teaching students on a daily basis, what does prayer and meditation look like, and what does engaging in faith song look like, so that you really can develop that part of your brain. Absolutely.
Okay, so the title for this episode is Setting Up Worship to Win in Our Student Ministry. So we've got a lot of experience around the table, whether in leading worship or being led by worship, maybe. So what are some of the pro tips that you would say, okay, here are some of the things that even on a very practical level could help us create meaningful experiences when it comes to worship in our student ministry?
Ask students which songs they want to sing.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and I mean, going off that, I think that's huge, because we have to recognize if we're ministry leaders and we're worship leaders, we're probably a little bit older than these students, which means that you naturally have a preference towards a specific type of music. And so some of the best worship leaders I led with were the ones that would say, I don't like this song, but the kids do.
Yeah.
And as long as the lyrics are straight, like everything's good.
We've
like
all been there.
Yeah.
Those are the moments where it's just like, oh, I've sang this song like 200 times, but the students love it, so we're going to give it,
Yeah.
Get that.
And I think that's a win. If you're singing something that you don't like, it probably means somebody else does.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying don't like music, but I think that's great. Listen to your students.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, and I think even to build on that, I think we have an opportunity now. I mean, if you look at social media, we have the ability to reach students even throughout the week. So yeah, conversations are great, but if you catch them where they are and you're spending time where they are too, that's a great platform to be able to use to say, hey, what's a song you'd like to sing this year? Maybe give like 2 different songs. Do you want to hear this song A or song B?
Yeah.
And have them vote on it and comment on it. And so then you're actually increasing your social media following, which is going to give you more influence when they're not in your building.
Yeah.
But then also gives them a voice. A guy who I work with now, who's a student pastor at one of our other churches, is really great at this. They call it the People's Choice. And they do a really good job of that, of just sending this thing out and people respond. And he said that their attendance has even been higher because students are coming wanting to know which one won.
Yeah.
Did the one that I voted for, are we going to sing that song?
Yeah.
And then they're excited when it happens, So I think that's just another way to extend that idea of asking them, what they want to hear.
Awesome.
What they want to sing.
I think one more thing that as worship leaders and ministry leaders we might not pay as much attention to is transitions. I think that's one of those 1% changes that we can make that makes a huge difference. So part of your job as a worship leader is to help eliminate distractions. So what you can do is pay attention to the moments between when worship starts, between songs, and when worship ends.
Yeah.
Because if you can get to the point where it flows seamlessly, what you're doing is eliminating distractions so they're more free to focus on worship and on a big God. The teams I've served on have always pursued excellence in music, not because we're trying to reach this standard, but because the more excellent that we can be with the worship, the less distraction a student is going to have in that worship set.
Yeah.
The problem with bad notes isn't that you played a bad note. It's that students automatically go, whoa, bad note.
It takes you out of the moment.
So the better you can get at creating a seamless experience, the more comfortable your students are and the better they'll be able to engage in worship.
Yeah. And for most of us that are listening, we're probably not the ones that are leading worship. Like we talked about a few weeks ago, the whole rock star thing. Hopefully you're not the one that's hopping up there, that's hosting, leading the game, leading worship, and then going into the teaching.
Let me just say I have done that before. Not on purpose. It was because I made a mistake and didn't book somebody that I should have booked. And that is exhausting.
It is. And it's not long.
Just like
you
change
can't do that
hats.
long term. It just doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. It's not fun. Don't do it.
Yeah, so hopefully there's probably somebody that you have in mind. Maybe it's an intern, maybe it's an adult that's helping you with the worship stuff. Maybe it's some students, and maybe this is something, one of the podcasts that you share with them, and that can spark some conversations that you need to have. But the way that I categorize a lot of times that worship is led in student ministry is they tend to be either playlist worship or preaching worship, where on the playlist side of worship, it's like there's a song, the song's over, everything stops, people change the capos, people adjust the microphones, there's kind of an awkward 10 seconds, and then it's like you hit play on the next song, and then you start playing the next song. It's just like a playlist. And then the other side is like the preaching side, where sometimes you've got somebody who's a little bit more comfortable on stage, and then the transition between songs lasts 2 to 3 minutes, when you needed it to last about 15 to 20 seconds. And it's that person's opportunity to kind of share what, for them, it's their opportunity to share what God's doing in my life, what's going on in my heart, what I feel like I want them to hear from this song. Those are all great things. But when we get better at those transitions and what they look like, it just helps to build that momentum the whole time and to keep that seamless experience like you're talking about, Tyler. And it doesn't leave those opportunities for people to go like, okay, this song's over. Okay, it's quiet. This is weird. I'm going to pull my phone out and I'm going to look at my phone. And now I'm disengaged. Or they're looking at their friends like, how long is this person going to talk? Like, are we going to sing the next song?
And once again, they're disengaged.
Yep. Yeah. And so I think that's a huge lens that I always try to look through our worship experience with. What possible things are happening right now that could help students disengage? So being intentional about like double and triple checking the grammar and the spelling for the slides that have lyrics on them.
Yes,
That's a huge thing. Like, let's be consistent about, are we capitalizing things or are we not? Are we putting periods at the end of things or are we not? Are we going left justified or center justified?
Are we using Times New Roman or are we using something that's way cooler?
Papyrus.
Papyrus.
Oh no, Avatar. But yeah, just being, whether it's that or lighting. Your house lights should probably not be on in the whole room if it's possible. For some of you, you've got a space, and it just is what it is. You've got to, there's nothing you can do. And for some of you, there are some tweaks that you can make to create better transitions to help them stay more engaged. That, to be honest, too often we're kind of running around trying to do so many different things that we don't really even recognize what some of those pieces might be. Having somebody who knows what they're doing with the soundboard be in charge, where there's like a decent level of a decent mix of what's going on. And if it's too quiet, nobody's going to sing. If it's too loud, nothing's going to sound right because it's weird. So you've got to find somebody who has the talent and the understanding to find in your room, in your space, with whatever instruments and vocals are being played, what's the sweet spot of this mix that is going to create the best opportunity for them to kind of enter in and engage in what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Your job is to point to Jesus, and you can do that so many different ways, like the things you say, the transitions, but it's also in those details where we can better point to Jesus when we turn the volume down on other things too, where students can zone in on the lyrics and the message to a song. That's our win if we can do that.
Yeah. What you mentioned there too, I think lends toward another that's a much bigger idea. And by bigger, I mean, you would have to dive way into it. It'd probably be a whole other podcast. But this idea of having everyone who's involved bought in. When you talk about having somebody who's running sound who knows what they're doing, this isn't just about the student pastor being bought in and maybe the worship leader being bought in and then just finding whoever else can be involved just because they're warm bodies who are filling the seats. And, and depending on the size of your ministry, some of you have cameras that you're running and lights and all that kind of stuff. And others of you just have a couple of people. Regardless of where you are, I think it's important to have everybody on the same page, looking toward this unified front of pointing students to Jesus. And I think when you can get that, and that takes a while to build. But when you can move in that direction, I heard somebody recently explain this from a team standpoint. If everybody's on the same side of the rope pulling in one direction, everybody's bought in. Everybody is, you don't have people who are just, serving food outside, but they're building an environment where students can have conversations. So now suddenly this has way more meaning. But that's part of the vision. That's part of all that. But it goes back to the intentionality and, paying attention to the little details like that.
Yeah, that's so good.
And for any youth workers listening who are maybe not as passionate about music as everyone sitting at this table, I bet there's somebody in your church who is. Yeah. And seek them out and ask them to help you. And I know that it takes a lot of work to build a music ministry in your church or even a culture of music. And I think that if you find somebody who's passionate about it, where you don't have to generate energy around it, and they can help lead all of those details and help you build it, you'll find yourself able to engage in a different way. For example, I'm personally, as much as I wish I was musically talented, I'm really not musically talented. I just really love music. But what I found I was able to add was things like, when there's students on stage, the worship leader can't necessarily see them. So what I could do from the back of the room was tell the worship leader afterwards, hey, when you're talking, the kids on stage should probably look at you, not make faces at their friends in the room. Like you can help coach. Yep. It has nothing to do with music. It has everything to do with environment and culture. And you might even be able to help that worship leader understand that hey, I think maybe the students aren't connecting with you because you're hiding behind your guitar, or your eyes are closed the whole time, or you're staring at the confidence screen in the back of the room. You know these lyrics. You're just doing that out of habit. Look in their eyes. Engage them with who you are. And I think that even if you're not musically talented, you have so much you can offer in this area that has nothing to do with music.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked a lot about confidence monitors, soundboards, different things like that, for some of you that might be at larger churches or have larger student ministries, you're thinking like, yep, I'm following. But let's put ourselves in the shoes of, all right, it's a youth ministry. I've got a room in the corner of the church, and we don't have a soundboard. We have lights that do two things. They turn on and they turn off. And
Yes.
I don't have a
And some of them you can't even turn them off. They go off automatically.
So what can worship? What can introducing this idea of worship for these youth pastors? What can that look like? What are some ideas we can give them?
Yeah. I have 100% been there. The ministry that I'm a part of now, we do have a lot of the flashy things, if you will.
Yeah.
But to be on both sides of it, it's really cool to see how in a situation, years and years ago, when I first got my start 15, 20 years ago, we met in a trailer. So it wasn't even attached to the building. And we had the light that would flip on, the fluorescent lights, and then you would flip them off. And we didn't turn them off. I just said flip them off. I can't.
Yeah.
We wouldn't do that. We would not flip them off. We would not turn the lights off because then the room would be completely dark. And then, of course, with high schoolers, that's just a completely different problem. So, no, but it was cool to see in that situation and in other situations how you can have equally powerful worship experiences, whether you have lights and incredible big sound equipment, or if you have a guy or a girl with a guitar and no microphone and just an intimate setting. I've been in some settings just within the past year where it was me and a guitar, and we set up some Christmas lights in a tent. And it was one of the most powerful times that we've ever been able to have, just because it was chill and it was good, and the songs were what rose to I guess the center of the experience. It wasn't about all of the other things. So I mean, I think a lot of it's just getting creative with the space that you have.
Yeah, I was gonna say creativity is so much of that. Yes, you've got to find someone that can play guitar. Right. You've got to find someone that can sing. Yep. But hang on, some string lights, some Christmas lights. There are some different things. It just comes down to, okay, do we want this to be a value, and how creative can we get with this? Yeah,
and I was gonna say too, like if you are that ministry leader who maybe just has a worship guy or girl that's got a guitar and shows up. I would also say technology is your friend, and we're in a really cool place where there are apps that you can, if you've got a soundboard and an iPad, there are apps that can give you like a full band sound that are pretty cheap to use. So like lean into that. I just remember playing keys with a drummer, which is just a weird sound. But like you can avoid that altogether if you can run tracks or something like that. It's a cool opportunity to have that. So just take advantage of it. Yeah.
I think one of the things I've learned in traveling to different countries, especially when they don't have access to technology and they don't have any musical instruments, I think I've been wowed at the fact that when you have 2 or 3 people who are willing to sing their face off, you don't need a musical instrument.
Yeah, that's true.
Like you just need 2 or 3 people who are willing to fully engage with that song and not hold back, and it gives everyone else in the room permission to do the same. So
for me, interns, like if you've not tried to reach out to some colleges in your area to try to find somebody that you can come in and do for, hey, could you do this for free? Will you give a couple hours on Wednesdays to come in and just help this work for us, to lead these songs, to do these things? If you haven't looked into that, I think that could be the solution, or a big part of the solution for a lot of ministries. I know that worked for me in multiple settings.
Yeah. And if you don't know what you're looking for, ripped skinny jeans.
Yeah.
That's what
I was hoping that was going to come up in this conversation. Like, where do you go for the worship leader uniform?
There's a special.
Where do you look to see the update?
There's a special Amazon link that only worship leaders get.
Is that on the worship leader guide, Tyler?
It's like an Amazon worship leader wish list.
That would be. We should do that. We should put a link to a suggested worship leader.
My H&M shopping bag.
Here are examples of songs to play. Here are examples of what to wear. I like that.
So as we wrap up this conversation, any last thoughts?
I think we always have to take it back to this, but remember, it's your relationship with Jesus that's most important, and then second, your relationship with students. So you will fail as a worship leader if you are not living a life that also points to Jesus. And the way you interact with those students off the stage really, really matters, because they're going to see through whatever you've got going on. We talked about a lot of practical ways like lights, tracks, guitar, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, who you are on and off the stage matters. So invest in that the most.
Yeah, that's good. I would add to that, and we mentioned this earlier, but I think a lot of the worship experience, I think, is to take them on a journey. And so that requires the intentionality. It requires people being bought in. It requires you being who you are, who you say you are, on and off the field, on and off the stage, behind the scenes and in front of the scenes. You've got to make sure that everything that you're doing is with the intentionality and the attention to detail, so that you eliminate distractions. But it is taking them on a journey. I think tying things together from the welcome to the very last note that's played, or when you say amen and people get up and go wherever they're going to go afterwards. You have to think the whole experience. It's not just about the songs. It's a whole experience.
I think lastly, I would say just remember who you're leading. I mean, high school students, middle school students, learn the developmental differences between middle and high school students, and that's naturally going to sway the way that you lead them. And I think that is going to be what really helps in the connection with those students.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that we'd all agree that worship can play a huge role in our student ministries, because the reality is that worship plays a huge role in our faith formation and our spiritual lives. And as middle schoolers and high schoolers, I know I can point back, when I look back at my faith, a lot of those main times that I remember as a middle schooler and high schooler, there's usually music involved. Because Trey, like you said earlier, there's that dynamic emotional power that can happen sometimes when you're with a group of people and you're all of one mind and you're all singing together. There's something powerful that happens there, and that doesn't always have to happen in a big group. I can think of small times that happen in a small youth room or something with a handful of people. It's not always some big thing. And so the idea that worship matters, but if we're intentional, we can help it matter more, I think is kind of what I'm hearing from a lot of this, whether it's some of the resources that we use or getting a little more intentional about transitions, different pieces like that. So hopefully this is a helpful piece of what we've been talking about. Well, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us today and joining us for the Rethinking Youth Ministry podcast. We would love to get some feedback from you all. You can follow us on Facebook.com/XP3 Students, Twitter and Instagram at XP3 Students. You can find us at rethinkingrym.org. Hit us up. Let us know what we're doing well, what you'd love to hear us talk through. And if you'd enjoyed today's episode, we would love for you to subscribe to the podcast, however you listen to podcasts. And again, maybe share this with somebody that you're involved with in leading worship in some capacity, or maybe this is the way that you start the conversation with someone and saying, hey, we're not doing anything with worship right now in youth ministry. I listened to this podcast. It's really sparking me to get more intentional about it. Would you take a listen? Can we talk about what this could look like? And we talked about a little bit ago, Tyler talked about the worship leader guide that we help do in all of our XP3 series. We're going to put one of those in the show notes from one of the series just to give you an idea of what that looks like and the kind of intentionality that goes into that, in case that helps spark some ideas of what that could look like for you.
I think we also should, in the show notes, put a link to Tyler's choice of worship leader outfit, Trey's choice of worship leader outfit, just so that the listeners can get to know them better.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So listeners will just
great idea.
They'll just have to go there and see if that happened.
Mine will be pricey.
Now they're all.
So on that note, we'd love for you to visit rethinkingrym.org to see if that happens and how expensive Tyler's worship leader outfit is, and how wide the knees are in the hole of the jeans. So on that note, until next time, thanks for hanging out with us and thanks for listening.